You have 2 minutes to clear out your locker. Security will escort you out. The supervisor's radio crackled with a dry, metallic hiss, the sound shattering in the stainless steel, clad service corridor behind the Grand Ballroom. No one saw who spoke. They didn't need to. At the Seraphina Grand, orders always came from the shadows. Vance was straightening a line of gleaming silver service trolleys. Their wheels trembled lightly on the gray tile floor, making a faint tick each time they rolled over the grout lines. His hands hesitated for just a beat, long enough for his shadow on the steel to blur like water touched by a fingertip. In that warped reflection, he saw her, Amelia, the new girl, only a week on the job, white shirt stained with a faint splash of champagne, eyes wide as if caught in a headlight beam. Her chin trembled, trying to swallow hard and look strong, but her fingers still clutched the apron strap until her knuckles went white. Just a few meters beyond this wall, crystal chandeliers in the Grand Ballroom poured milk-white light onto honey-colored wood floors. The string ensemble was playing a lilting three-quarters waltz, carrying satin gowns in slow waves across the room. Soft laughter, the chime of crystal glasses. On this side, the refrigeration units rumbled steadily. The sharp scent of chlorine cleaner mingled with the metallic tang of steel, and the silence lay heavy, like a walk-in freezer door just slammed shut. "Your fault," another voice pronounced, like reading minutes into a record. "And fault must be paid for." No one said her name. Here, names made things personal, and personal was breakable. Leo didn't turn his head. He clicked the latch on the trolley case, counted down 3, 2, 1, and exhaled, pressing his shoulder seems flat, as if to clamp down an old habit, the habit of hiding every reaction behind the dark gray uniform. The fine, thread-like scar at his wrist stretched as he twisted it to lock a break. No one here knew the story of that scar. They only saw a man who spoke low, did his job right, rarely talked, and was always where someone needed to be. A voice as hard as a metal stair tread cut through the air. "Out of the way." Markham passed by. Charcoal suit, black shoes polished to a mirror shine, gaze never resting on anyone for more than a tenth of a second. He walked past Amelia, as though she were a smudge recently wiped. No pause, no stoop. His left hand flicked the watch on his wrist, a subtle correction. The schedule would stay on time. The event would stay on time. People, if they weren't right, would be adjusted or replaced. At the corner where two corridors met, a hunched figure was mopping the floor. Trainee uniform still stiff with store-press creases. Name badge, Henry. He moved strangely, slow, measured, as if counting someone else's breaths. Henry glanced at the steel, saw Markham's reflection pass without ripples, saw Amelia breathless, saw Leo's hand on the trolley frame, as though holding shut a door that wanted to burst open. When Markham disappeared around the corner, Leo stepped away from the row of trolleys. He didn't look straight at Amelia. Here, direct eye contact was the same as exposure. He paused at the water cooler, filled a plastic bottle, cap already off, then walked past her as if by coincidence, like someone swapping workstations. His wrist turned, and the bottle slipped neatly into her hand. "Breathe deep," he murmured, low enough for the compressor to swallow half the words. "This floor's slick. You're not the only one." Amelia bit her lip. I didn't drink." Leo didn't wait for her to finish. One hand pulled open a stepladder, the other, so fast you'd miss it if you blinked, slipped a flat bundle of green into her apron pocket. $20 bills stacked smooth as fine napkins. "Cab fare home," he said, still talking to the ladder. "Don't come back tonight." She shook her head on instinct, but the bottle grew lighter in her hand as her throat found a swallow. Her knees steadied. Her wide eyes began to lower, like a window sliding back into its safe frame before a gust. Henry stopped mopping. From the shadow of the ventilation pipes, he looked through the steel like a static screen monitor. He saw clearly how Leo made everything small, the low voice, the minimal movements, the soundless steps. In places like this, kindness only survived if it knew how to be silent. "Vance," a supervisor barked. Leo answered, yes, just loud enough to be heard over the cold hum, not enough to disturb the waltz through the wall. He returned to the trolleys, checked the brakes, and pulled the silver covers taut. Everything kept rolling as if nothing had happened. In the Grand Ballroom, the master of ceremonies raised a glass. Applause rang round and crisp like a tennis ball hitting strings. On this side of the wall, someone yanked open the cold room door, a plume of white mist spilling out, blurring every edge. Henry swapped buckets, knelt to wring the mop, letting water run in curved streaks on the floor like erased sentences. He looked again. The scene was layered like film stock. In the foreground, Leo. Behind him, Amelia, slowly pulling out her phone, her fingers trembling on a screen cracked at the corner. Maybe to call her mother. Maybe to type a resignation. Maybe to search for a route home through Chicago's map of highways like veins. Markham returned, this time with a security guard. No one looked at Amelia anymore. They looked at the space behind her, where rules hung like a red exit sign overhead. "Let's go," the guard said, his tone neither harsh nor warm. His job was to remove people, not break them. Amelia swallowed. She took her bag, strap worn thin from cheap make, zipper snagging a moment, then walked on. She passed Leo. No one said, "Thank you." Here, those two words could expose everything. When they vanished from sight, Henry straightened. He could feel the building's heartbeat. Elevator dings, revolving door swishes, dishwashers hissing, footsteps on polished tile. Everything ran on time, on beat, like a symphony perfectly conducted, as long as you didn't look into the orchestra pit, where men like Leo were bracing cracked beams. A shift manager passed Henry, wrinkling her nose at the smell of cleaning solution. "Follow procedure," she said, pointing at a safety-first poster tacked crookedly to the wall, one corner peeling like a chipped nail. Henry nodded, mopping more slowly. He didn't remember the words. He remembered the tilt of the poster. Leo worked on, shoulders slightly bowed, but steps unweighted. He rolled the last trolley into place, wedged a wooden shim under a worn wheel, a piece he'd whittled from an old banister. What wasn't supplied, he found. What wasn't fixed, he fixed himself. Then he tucked his gloves into his back pocket, like folding away a sigh. Henry watched until his own breathing unconsciously matched the man's movements. He saw something KPI reports would never note. A man using his own body to cover a breach the system chose to ignore. Not a hero, just a finger-sized wedge of wood. Right place, right time. That night, when the clock struck midnight, Henry sat alone in his rented attic room 3 blocks from the hotel. The small window framed a rectangle of Chicago sky, cut by concrete. He opened a thin black leather notebook. No charts, no quarterly targets. Just a single line, penned in steady, weighted script. Leo Vance. What? The faint clang of metal on metal rang out, spreading through the vast kitchen like the toll of a warning bell. Leo Vance stood angled beside the honing table, steady hands guiding a young cook's knife across the whetstone, his motions slow and precise, as if teaching a ritual. "Keep the blade at this angle. That's it. Let's own weight do the heavy work. Don't force it." His voice was quiet, but enough to cut through the roar of the industrial exhaust fans above. The scent of grilled meat, butter sauce, and the heat from dozens of gas burners coiled around them, clinging to skin like a thin mist. The young cook nodded, a bead of sweat tracing down his neck. "Thanks, Leo. They didn't teach this in training." Leo smiled faintly, his gaze momentarily distant. "Some things aren't in the manuals, but they'll save your hands for life." A soft cough sounded behind them. Both turned. Markham stood there, hands in his pockets, eyes like a thin blade, cold and sharp. "Mr. Vance," he said, voice slicing in as neatly as a knife through pastry crust, "we have a proper training protocol. No one is allowed to break it. This time I'll pretend I didn't see it. Next time," he paused, the corner of his mouth curling like someone weighing the pleasure of punishment, "you'll have plenty of time to sharpen knives all day at home." His eyes left Leo's as if stamping an official warning. Markham's footsteps faded toward the management office, leaving in the air the bitter tang of power abused. Leo didn't respond. He simply looked down at the whetstone, the cold light from the fluorescents glinting off its damp surface. That image flickered, then dissolved into an old memory. 10 years ago, he'd been a newly arrived immigrant, halting English, stepping into the vast kitchen of the Seraphina Grand like entering a labyrinth of metal and fire. The noise ricocheted everywhere, knives chopping on boards, pots and pans clashing, someone shouting "hot behind" while carrying a tray of blazing roasts. He'd stood lost in a narrow passageway, unsure where to go. A large, warm hand landed on his shoulder. "Careful, kid. In here, stand in the wrong spot and you'll lose a finger." That was Sam Jones, the head chef. There were lines of fatigue in his eyes, but they lit up at the sight of a newcomer trembling in the chaos. Sam didn't just show Leo the way. He gave him a temporary place to sleep on his couch when he learned Leo hadn't found housing yet. They shared simple staff meals, slices of bread, some cold cuts, sometimes a hot bowl of soup. Sam taught him more than cooking. He taught him how to watch the rhythm of a kitchen, how to work smart instead of just hard. "They pay for our hands, Leo," Sam once said, wiping down a knife while looking at him. "But your soul is yours. Never sell it." Then came that fateful night, an ultra-luxury dinner for the hotel's biggest investor. The menu, fresh salmon, just shipped from Alaska. But when the crates were opened, the rancid smell and gray flesh told the whole story. Leo remembered how Sam immediately reported it to the shift manager, a young assistant named Markham. Markham glanced at the crate, shrugged. "Use another batch." "There is no other batch," Sam replied, his voice taut. "If we serve this, we'll poison the whole room." Markham only smirked. "No one will know. Just cook it well." Sam refused. In under an hour, he reinvented the entire menu, using whatever remained in the pantry to turn what could have been a disaster into a dazzling success. The substitute seafood dishes were plated with elegance, and guests showered praise. Leo had thought then, this is what a real chef is. But the next morning, Leo saw that Sam had called into the office. The door closed. 30 minutes later, he emerged looking drained of blood. No white chef's hat. Hands empty. "What happened?" Leo started after him. Markham appeared behind, holding a sheet of paper. "Unauthorized menu changes. Serious violation. Termination effective immediately." His tone was dry, like reciting a memorized formula. Leo wanted to protest, but Sam put a hand on his shoulder, just as he had the day they met. "Don't," he murmured, a sad smile without bitterness. "Don't let this place take the person you are, kid." They parted in the back parking lot. Sam's figure dwindled, swallowed by the yellowed streetlights of Chicago. And then he was gone from Leo's life. Now, after Markham's warning, Leo looked at the industrial fridge door, where his own reflection stretched and warped under the fluorescent glare. He didn't just see himself. He saw Sam standing there, still wearing that tired smile and speaking his final reminder. The new head chef barked an order. A tray of grilled meat had to be out in 3 minutes. Leo returned to his work, but inside, a deep current had begun to rise. 10 years ago, he'd stood powerless as Sam was swallowed by this system. He had stayed silent. But now, he knew he wouldn't let history repeat itself. Arthur Sterling sat in the cramped attic room he rented to maintain his cover as Henry. The small window opened onto a sliver of Chicago where the sickly yellow of the street lamps merged with the night's cold fog. The room smelled faintly of old paper and stale coffee. On the desk lay a black leather notebook, his laptop open to a collection of videos and reports he'd gathered over the past month. He reviewed everything. Footage from hidden cameras, internal reports, and fragmented interviews with staff. Each piece was a sign of a system rotting from within. Markham had built a culture of fear so deep that every mistake was buried. Staff didn't dare report incidents. No one dared to try something different. Those who spoke up often vanished from the schedule within a week. Turnover was so high that the cost of recruitment and retraining devoured a huge sum. Yet on paper, Markham still reported steady profit growth. Arthur's eyes lingered on one chart. The numbers, in theory, looked perfect, but he knew exactly how they'd been made, by slashing benefits, enforcing unpaid overtime, and blaming the lowest-level employees to cover management's errors. The real price was what his grandfather used to call the soul of the Seraphina Grand. He opened a video showing Leo Vance quietly translating safety signs into Spanish and Polish, then taping them up in service areas. No one had asked. No one paid him for it. Another clip. Leo teaching a new housekeeper how to hold the industrial vacuum so her back wouldn't hurt. Another still. Buying coffee for the entire night shift out of his own pocket, then slipping away before anyone could say thank you. None of these acts would ever appear in a performance report. But Arthur knew it was precisely such small things that kept this place from collapsing entirely. He decided to test something. That afternoon, Henry deliberately stacked the luxury napkins in the wrong sequence, a mistake any manager would pounce on. Sure enough, Markham appeared, publicly berated him in a voice like a hammer on steel, and wrote up a formal reprimand on the spot. No instruction, no chance to fix it. Hours later, near the end of the shift, Leo came over to Arthur. He didn't say a word about the mistake. He simply res-tacked every napkin in the correct order, hands quick and sure, then gave Arthur's shoulder a light tap, enough to say, "Keep going. You'll be fine." The difference between those two styles of management was as stark as light and shadow. That night, Arthur opened his laptop and breached the hotel's old personnel archive. He pulled up Samuel Jones's file. Digital pages appeared, along with an attached email flagged "Archive Do Not Delete." He clicked. Before him was an email Sam had sent to Markham hours before that long-ago investor dinner. The contents: a warning that the salmon shipment was spoiled and unsafe to serve. The evidence was clear, indisputable. Markham had ignored the warning, then pinned the blame on Sam to hide his own mistake. Arthur sat in silence. In the muffled hum of the city through the window, he felt a cold anger rising. This was no longer a business investigation. This was a purge. He shut the laptop, stood, and picked up his phone. His voice dropped as he called the head of security. "Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. Lock down the boardroom. No one goes in or out until I say so. And give me the last known address of Samuel Jones." Arthur ended the call. In the small attic room, Henry no longer existed. His gaze was now as cold as steel, and the silence hung heavy, like a sentence already signed. The next morning, the grand lobby of the Seraphina Grand looked like a stage set for an opulent performance. Red carpets stretched from the revolving doors, the scent of fresh lilies from towering vases mingling with the rich aroma of Arabica coffee. But when the doors turned open, it wasn't the awkward, out-of-place Henry who stepped through. It was Arthur Sterling, CEO of the entire hotel chain, dressed in a perfectly tailored Italian suit, steel blue tie, his stride so assured it felt as if every marble tile had been laid to receive him. Every eye in the lobby followed him. The front desk staff straightened, their mouths opening and closing wordlessly. At the far end, Markham froze like a statue when he realized who was walking toward him. Seconds earlier, he had been the ruler of this space. Now, he looked like a predator caught in a floodlight. "Boardroom," Arthur said when he stopped in front of him. Not loud, but with a low resonance that made defiance impossible. The boardroom doors closed behind the entire management team. The piano music from the lounge was gone. The chatter of guests had vanished. What remained was a dense, charged silence, the surface of water before a storm breaks. Arthur didn't begin with accusations. He powered on the large screen and let the evidence appear one by one. Falsified financial reports, charts showing a skyrocketing turnover rate, and finally, the email from Samuel Jones, buried for a decade. With each document, Markham's expression shifted, tense, then defensive, then pale. Arthur signaled to the head of security, "Bring Leo Vance here." In less than 2 minutes, the door opened. Leo walked in, still in his oil-speckled uniform, a wrench in his hand he hadn't yet put away. He thought he'd been summoned for disciplinary action for defying Markham. But when his eyes met Henry, he froze. Gone was the clumsy trainee. Standing before him was Arthur Sterling, heir to an empire. Inside Leo, it felt as though the ground had tilted. Arthur turned his back to the management team and faced Leo. "You look at this man," he said, his voice steady, each word hard as steel. "You wrote him up. You mocked him. You treated him like a problem. But in the past 28 days, I have seen this man do the work of all of you combined. He doesn't build reports. He builds a team. He doesn't protect profits. He protects people. Arthur turned to Markham. You destroyed a good man named Sam Jones to cover your own incompetence. And Leo Vance has spent the last 10 years repairing your damage, making sure no one else would endure what Sam endured. He opened his leather briefcase, pulled out a thick file, and set it on the table before Leo. As of today, we are establishing a new division, the Sterling Standard Department of Employee Development and Mentorship. This division will report directly to me, and you, Mr. Vance, will be its first director. Inside the file was an unprecedented salary, equity in the hotel, and full authority to rebuild the training program across the entire chain. The boardroom held its breath. Leo stood there, his hands trembling slightly. He didn't look at the file. He looked straight into Arthur's eyes, where a decade's worth of locked-away emotion seemed to surface. His voice was hoarse. Sam, did he ever know? The question hung in the air like a long, sustained note, then fell into utter stillness. No one moved. No one breathed hard. Only the slow, deliberate beating of hearts, each one waiting for the answer. Arthur looked at Leo for a long moment, and for the first time that morning, the formality of a CEO fell away. His voice dropped, no longer cold as steel, but carrying the sincerity of a man speaking as himself. I'm looking for him, Leo, he said slowly, clearly. We're going to find him together. It wasn't just a promise, it was a pact. An invisible thread tied the two men together. One who had endured 10 years of silence, and one who had just decided to break that cycle. Arthur turned to Markham. There was no theatrical dismissal, no need for more bitter words. Security will escort you out, he said, firm and final. That was it. The ruthless loop Markham had engineered ended by his own hand. The room emptied, leaving only Arthur and Leo standing face to face. Leo lowered his head, his voice quiet. I don't know how to be a director. I just know how to fix a broken coffee machine and show people how not to get burned. Arthur stepped closer, resting a hand on his shoulder. That's exactly why I chose you. I have a dozen people who can read spreadsheets. I need someone who can read people. The Seraphina doesn't need another manager. It needs a teacher. I'm not asking you to sit in an office. I'm asking you to rebuild the soul of this place from the ground up with your own two hands. Leo drew a deep breath. The weight of 10 years seemed to lift from his shoulders. He raised his head, his gaze steady now. I have one condition, he said, his voice stronger. This new department, the first training room, has to be named after him. The Sam Jones Center for Excellence. Arthur smiled and nodded without hesitation, as if that condition had always been part of the plan. And on the plaque, there will be a line, where a steady hand is always offered. Weeks later, an old service room was transformed. Freshly painted walls, warm lighting, clean tables and chairs. Leo didn't wear a suit, just his familiar uniform, but pressed and neat. He stood among a group of new hires, faces both eager and nervous. He didn't give a speech. He didn't talk about vision or mission. He took the hand of a young woman and showed her how to hold a heavy silver tray, so her wrist wouldn't ache, his voice patient and warm. At the doorway, Arthur Sterling stood in silence, watching, a genuine smile on his lips. Not for cameras, not for the board, but for this moment alone. On the wall, a brand new brass plaque was bolted firmly in place, the engraved letters gleaming. The Sam Jones Center, where a steady hand is always offered. The room stood as the first brick laid to rebuild the foundation of the Seraphina Grand, not from steel or stone, but from people. If you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change an entire system, let this story remind you that it is the quiet ones like Leo Vance who are the true foundation of any place. What would you do in his position? Would you stay silent, or would you stand to protect those who deserve it? Share this story so more people can believe that kindness and integrity still have a place, even in the coldest of places. Leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to Toch Story so you don't miss more stories that touch the heart. Because sometimes all it takes is one steady hand offered to change an entire life.